to talk for a little bit now on what is called bioregional herbalism. So I wrote here the original herbalism because the concept of bioregional herbalism is that you're working with the things that are there in your bioregion. So your botanical region, like what are the herbs that can grow around you? And so obviously in the last 20, 30 years, there's been a huge, the global herbal trade has existed since the beginning. And we obviously talked about this, spice trade and things like that having a big impact on human migration. But it really amped up, especially in like the 80s and 90s and 2000s and the last decade. Oh my goodness, like it's banging the herbal trade, right? There's billions of dollars being made off of this. And, people are going and getting plants from all different places around the world and then importing them. And that is not always the best. So I think people are starting to realize, though, that, wait, let's return to some of these, original herbal notions of working with the herbs that are around us, because not only does it reduce that energy consumption, that big footprint that we're making when we're shipping herbs all around the place, but also if you work with the herbs that are local to you, you are, and how I've put it here is you share their local defenses that they developed in response to the same environmental factors we are facing. So a little example I give is eucalyptus. For example, if a eucalyptus tree, if people are familiar with them, there's lots, it's not native to here, but it certainly made itself happy here. And so in places like California, San Francisco, you can walk through some of the parks in San Francisco and they're just huge eucalyptus trees everywhere. They really thrive in damp environments. And so if you think about that, like if a really damp, cool environment like San Francisco, that can give us fungal issues and that can give us lung issues. But yet these eucalyptus trees, they're growing in that same environment and they're thriving, right? And so what are they doing? Well, they're producing these things that are called secondary metabolites. So these aren't the primary metabolites like protein and fat and sugars or whatever that are essential to life. They're these extra secondary chemicals that they're producing that help them thrive, right? And help them, do other things like survive a fungal invasion, for example. So they produce all these essential oils, which would be in the secondary metabolite, which is very antifungal. So if we lived in San Francisco and it's very damp and it's cool and we're getting lung mucousy problems, we can use that eucalyptus to help us deal with those damp conditions, right? Drink that cup of eucalyptus tea, breathe in that eucalyptus steam, and it really opens the lungs and it helps break up the mucus and helps you clear out that mucus and helps you fight infection, which might be trying to settle in so you don't turn into some kind of bronchitis situation. So bioregional herbalism, has that really incredible piece for it, where if you work with the herbs that are around you, you can thrive. There's also this concept of that the herbs that you need are there for you. So this is a picture I took when I was down. This was before so in Atlanta, when the George Floyd marches started, because there were marches. So I was down there that first day when there's a really big march that was planned, at kind of a normal thing where it starts around the CNN Center and at Centennial Park there, and then you kind of thread through town, and then you work your way to the Capitol. So it's a really common march path. And so, on there along with this march, and you could feel that there was a lot of energy, and then energy got, higher and higher. And by that night, things had gotten a bit, more violent. Because there was just a lot of anger and there was a lot of emotions that were needing to come out and that were coming out. And so the picture that's below here, this is a picture of something that grows in Atlanta. It's not native. It was brought to Georgia in the 1700s. It's called mimosa is the common name, and its botanical name is Albizia julibriscens. It's a beautiful tree. It's in the legume family. You can tell that by the leaves it makes. They're very legumy looking. And it is just a lovely plant, and it is so supportive for the heart and for what in Chinese medicine, because this is originally an Asian plant that you can find it in the Chinese Materia Medica, and it is for the Shen, which would be, you could kind of translate it as the spirit. So it's very uplifting and supportive and grounding and nurturing to the Shen. So it's great for angst or anxiety or emotional distress. And as the days went on in Atlanta, and we're in the middle of COVID fear and anxiety, and then you put onto that all the injustice that's going on, and then of course we had some additional, there was another killing that happened pretty soon after, and just really difficult. And everyone is having a really hard time. Lots of arrests are happening. So we were doing lots of jail support and dropping care packages to people as soon as they get out of jail, trying to provide them herbs. And one of the herbs, and this was the season that it was blooming, right? So this is when we're making this medicine. It's mimosa season. May, June, July are mimosa season. And so that herb that we needed at that moment is there for us. And so we were putting it in a lot of our remedies. We were pouring through it. So bioregional herbalism is about not only that, the herbs that are there can help you thrive, but also, just a reminder that like when you're in need, to take a look around and you'll find what you need. So this kind of brings me in a little bit to concepts of community herbalism. And when I introduced at the beginning to Herbalista and the work that we do, you could see that we're kind of a community-based herbal project and program. And so I wanted to kind of hone in on that a little bit now. I have put here a quote from an article I read in the New York Times by a gentleman named Dr. Sandeep Jahar. I don't know if I've pronounced that right. And the article was called "When Blood Pressure is Political." And so I just wanted to read this out and then talk about it a little bit. So he says, the body doesn't so much defend a particular set point as allow it to fluctuate in response to changing demands, including those of one's social circumstances. And he makes this statement after talking a little bit about something known as homeostasis. And people often think of human health as being, that there's this ideal and that you try to stay in that balance. And that ideal is 120/80, right? If you're talking about blood pressure, for example, and that we use all these blood pressure medications to keep someone's blood pressure right there. But the fact of the matter is, that's not what the body always wants to be at. The body doesn't always want to be at 120/80 because sometimes the body needs to be ready to run away from a saber-toothed tiger. It needs the blood pressure to go up. Sometimes, you're sleeping and you hope your blood pressure really goes down while you're relaxing and everything's relaxed. Sometimes, you're having sex and you want that blood pressure to be going up again. So the body doesn't always want to just be at this static point. The body, when it's healthy, when it's vital, it wants to fluctuate in response to changing demands. This is what he said here, fluctuate in response to changing demands. So that includes what's around us. That includes our social circumstances. That includes our environmental circumstances. So he's saying this as a doctor. I mean, this is clear. This is how the body behaves. So he says today it is clear that chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes, and heart failure are inextricably linked to the state of our neighborhoods, jobs, and families. And we must use this information in the fight against rising income inequality, high imprisonment rates, and other social problems. So as a doctor, he is saying we understand how the body works, and we know that these chronic diseases are being driven by social circumstances. And so once we know that, we can never unknow that, right? So to be in healthcare means that we are engaged in social circumstances and the understanding that we need to support people to get access to the things they need, to have access to good food, good housing, good healthcare, obviously, good education, to feel like they're protected and they're safe and they're not being constantly exposed to violence. Like there's certain things that we need if we want to be able to support health. So, when doctors are told to stay out of politics, I just think that is crazy, because if a doctor really cares about someone's health, they are going to care about those social circumstances and those politics. So community herbalism is a philosophy of health and healing that extends beyond the individual, and it considers the larger ecosystem. Health is more than just your own isolated internal dynamics. It's a response to our relationships. It's a response to our environment, to our access to care, the cultural and social structures we are immersed in, and so much more. So, this is very much with those other themes that we've seen happening, right? It's not just about the individual. We've got to look at that individual in their larger environment. And that environment isn't just, is it a cold, damp country or a hot, dry country? That environment is also the social relationships that are happening around us, the social stressors that are happening around us. So on the website, we've got a couple sections where some of these concepts are explored. So I'm going to try to do my little switcheroo. Okay, so under resources, this is the herbalista.org website. If you scroll down to links, this is where I link to lots of things kind of outside of the website. Flowering tops of pedicularis, which is a lovely plant. It's native to, it's actually all over the United States. There's different species in different places. This is canadensis, so pedicularis canadensis. And this was gathered in North Carolina. It's a wonderful musculoskeletal relaxant and just sweet medicine. So here's the little index. It's a very long scrolling page, but healthcare is a human right and community healthcare projects. I think in these sections, there's some really great links if you want to learn more about Poor People's Campaign back in the 60s, which has been very inspiring for us. The Black Panthers, the work of the Black Panthers, super inspiring for us. And then on to all of these current community healthcare projects that are happening everywhere. And I haven't updated this list in a little while. There's the Black Panther Party. I don't know if people are very familiar with their work. They've obviously been involved in lots of different things. One of the main things is obviously being the liberation of Black peoples, and they were extremely focused on healthcare as well. So they really believed in the right to health, and they opened a lot of free clinics, and eventually I think they had about 13 operating across the country, and these are free clinics. It was a total community-based model, and they just realized not only that in order for people to, feel better and do better, they had to, have health care, but they also very much recognized that poor health was a result of oppression. And so this is an excerpt that was taken from their 10-point program. We want completely free healthcare for all Black and oppressed people. We believe that the government must provide free of charge for the people health facilities, which will not only treat our illnesses, most of which have come about as a result of our oppression, but which will also develop preventative medical programs to guarantee our future survival. I think this was added to the program, which I think was first maybe elucidated their point maybe in 70, and I think this was 72. They added this point on. By then they were like, yeah, we've got to focus on this. Here is a picture of one of their free health centers. Look at this little mobile unit there. Loving it. So they had a lot of different free health centers. They also did work like free school lunches and food for kids at school, because how are you going to study if you're hungry? Really doing that community work. So just want to give some props to their really creating these wonderful models that we can look at and be inspired by. So at Herbalista, we do strive for a community-based model of healthcare, again, based on solidarity and not charity. We create these different programs in a way that we hope keeps the costs down, that allows us to kind of learn from each other and give us all the chance to serve. So we have noticed, since the work started, the Herb Bus, first rolled out, it's, oh my God, actually today is the anniversary of the February 6th is the anniversary of the first Herb Bus clinic that we ever did. So the Herb Bus is 9 years old today. And, since that first little clinic, and you come through these years, you can just feel it. You can feel the herbal fabric in Atlanta has become stronger, and our support for each other, I call it a community care network, has really been created, because, it wasn't just about herbal medicine. It was about all kinds of things, about food supports. It was about, other kinds of healthcare practitioners. It was about other kinds of services that you could have access to. It was about mental health care. It was about, all these things. And, once you start doing that work and you start finding other people doing that work, and you come together and you make those connections, it really can make a difference. And so, we saw people feeling healthier, growing stronger. And so obviously, I was just talking about all the connections it was down to, but obviously also it's just from working with plants too. Plants are healing. That's an important connection just of its own, and one that is foundational. We wouldn't be here without the plants. We care so much about community healthcare that we have dedicated several resources